My body is ready.
Birdemic Shock and Terror is a romantic horror film released by Severin Films on February 27, 2010. The film was written and directed by James Wen, and it stars Alan Baugh, Whitney Moore, Adam Sessa, Catherine Bacha, and Rick Camp. As hard as it may be to get a consensus on what the greatest movie ever made is, the monumental brain-melting task of determining the worst film ever made is an often ignored statistic that is equally, if not more, difficult to determine. While many would be inclined to reference personal experiences they deemed a waste of a movie ticket, there's still an untapped goldmine of camcorder-quality garbage that only the most die-hard of cinephiles will likely be aware of. Movies such as Troll 2, The Room, and Plan 9 from Outer Space are all testaments to what a shoestring budget and harebrained direction can create. But these films are like an Alfred Hitchcock magnum opus compared to Birdemic Shock and Terror. But for those who believe the benchmark for bad stops at studio-made rom-com sequels, there will naturally arise the question of just how bad is this? Where does it go so wrong compared to other cinematic bottom feeders? In this review, we're gonna try very hard to keep our phones in our pocket and try and fully absorb the absolute state of this movie. The story begins by not beginning, opting instead to try and put together a romantic story using only the deleted scenes from Hallmark movies. To sum it up quick, boy meets girl, boy falls for girl, boy makes it big at work, girl makes it big at work, boy and girl celebrate their triumphs, boy starts his own business after his bank account gets kicked in the nards by green tech, girl is able to work from home despite being contracted by a distant big city company, boy and girl begin to bond after pumpkin patch days and watching a slideshow on science, and boy and girl consummate their love after realizing that motel rooms have more to offer than royalty-free club music. The story actually begins when, after listening to a lecture on the dangers of global warming in the periphery of the other story, a massive flock of seagulls, disguised as eagles, disguised as first-year Photoshop illustrations, attack the quaint little town of who knows where, causing our star-crossed lovers to pair up with a consummating couple 3 doors down to try and escape the disaster unfolding in front of them. After fighting off the bird horde by melting their brains with confusion, the couples escape in a van. As they escape, they run into a couple of children whose parents were killed in the attack, so they decide to pad the cast by taking them with them. The group makes several stops along the way to pick up supplies and receive some world-building exposition from a science guy before one of the women goes out like Elvis, taking a shit under unpleasant circumstances. The rest of the group head into town in order to complete the side quest of saving NPCs from a bus, only to find out that the birds spit acid, leading to the death of one or more of the people we've been following around like a lost puppy on hallucinogens. The next adventure after the run-in with the seagulls involves filling up on gas, getting stuck up on the roadside for their gas by discount Wilford Brimley, only for the cowboy to get killed by a passing bird animation, thus allowing our heroes to reclaim their gas. If only that's what they actually did. Later on, the group receive a National Geographic special from a friendly forest fairy before the trees light on fire, forcing the group to move on and find their friends dead in a ditch. The group then tragically run out of gas in what was most definitely an unavoidable turn of events, so they head down to the beach to catch some wild seaweed and cook it up for rations. The eagles attack once again, and our heroes run out of ammo to defend themselves, leaving them no choice but to sit back and await the fate we've all been begging for. In the final moments of the movie, the eagles are called away by a passing flock of doves, leaving our heroes at peace. The peace leads to our heroes returning to the beach so they can watch the bird overlays fly off onto the horizon for a long, 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 long. So here's a drinking game for those planning to watch this. Every time 60 seconds of screen time elapses, finish your drink, because that's the only way you're gonna survive this fucking movie. This is a movie that on paper has a story so surreal and insane that you would be obligated to see it from start to finish. But since this movie doesn't have a story, you're gonna instead spend that time trying to keep your brain from leaking out of your ears. The only reliable story beat present with any consistency is the global warming message, which might have been a noble one had it not felt like the movie was curb-stomping you with it. It doesn't help that it seems like the writing for those scenes was done in a different universe compared to the bird attack and romance plots that are supposed to be the guiding light of the movie. Well, that is if your idea of a guiding light is the headlights of a semi coming at you at ramming speed. It's hard to even describe how this movie plays out because, I'm gonna level with you here, I can't remember what the hell happened. The pacing of this movie is constantly bouncing from blink and you'll miss it and resting your eyes for an hour without missing a thing. The first half of the movie, and yes, I literally mean the first half of the movie, is entirely dedicated to building the romance between our two lead characters. But despite the amount of Oscar-winning character study you could fit into 45 minutes of screen time, you're instead getting two grown-ass adults flirting like 6-year-olds while living out their workplace fantasies of instant fortune. The disconnect between this 9-to-5 storyline and the literal birdpocalypse that follows it borders on... Actually, no it doesn't. It literally is just nonsensical. Combining this with the expert editing of scenes that either last 5 frames or 5 minutes, one would think they attempted to put this story together in a way comparable to trying to finish a jigsaw puzzle with Lego pieces. The old saying goes that what they don't know can't hurt them. But seeing as the actors in this movie had no idea what they were doing, and the result was Birdemic shock and terror, I dare not hazard a guess as to how much hurt that led to. I mean, it's one thing to show up unprepared for the day, but in these folks' cases, their lines come out like they just idly read them in the shower for the first time, every single time. Hey, maybe if they're reading their lines in the shower, it's causing the ink to smear. Maybe that explains the "am I reading this right" delivery. Or maybe that's just because the dialogue is about as quality as my 6th grade English essays. Or maybe it's so far beyond our understanding that you just phase out of reality trying to comprehend it. All that we can say for sure is that the main character walks like his pants are stacked with the remnants of a trip to Taco Bell, and it just makes me feel bad for the guy. The camera work is going to remind you of one of two things. It will either seem like a workplace VHS tape on how to give a customer service, or like a camcorder home movie where the crowning achievement was turning on the camera. Though the fact they turned on the camera for this facepalm generator with the intent to play it in front of audiences in theaters means that this movie doesn't even have that going for it. So ignoring the fact that the footage looks like it was run through a microwave, a sizable number of the shots and angles can only be described as, hey, there's a spot over there, wait until I give you the signal. The fact they are literally trying to film characters through crowds of people, or are just staring at their polos for 5 minutes at a time, leaves me regretful they haven't figured out how to reach through the TV Samara Morgan style so I can turn the camera off. ADR typically entails dubbing over footage in order to get that proper range of sound, emotion, or exertion, adding a certain je ne sais quoi that takes that scene from good to great. It is an oft-overlooked element of cinema that goes unappreciated by the average Joe, but in the case of Birdemic shock and terror, it would seem that the turntables are turned. Like tables. Or like this dead-as-hell joke rolling in its grave. There are so many instances of bad ADR that even the deaf will rewind to make sure they heard it right. At the best of times, the dubbed lines sound like the person was talking behind a running fan. At the worst of times, it sounds like they were trying to talk through the force of a goddamn hurricane. And at the very best of times, they forgot to put in anything at all. No joke, without even trying, I'm sure you could count on your hand instances where you're pretty sure something was supposed to be there. While the music works well enough, it's pretty generic in scope, basically just being a pick-your-poison fare of royalty-free music plunked in where music could be of some benefit. Don't have any idea what that must be like. But there are two notable exceptions. The first one being the instrumental cover of Imagine by John Lennon, which showed up for reasons I still haven't figured out. and the original, at least I'm assuming it's original, song, played in the bar when the two main characters are on their 50th first date before the end of the world. The lyrics are so mind-numbingly harmless and bland by design that it makes your ears want to bleed. And it goes on forever. And yes, some may call me out for thinking 2 minutes is forever, but when you gotta listen to this song and watch the two main characters make a pass at dancing to it for those 2 minutes, you'll be liable to surgically remove your eardrums too. Last and certainly least on the docket of critiques has gotta be the visual effects. I will not be the first to say that visual effects in a movie are typically one of the largest hurdles to overcome, and for those just getting their start, or perhaps trying to keep the bottom line above sinking, certain compromises have to be made. However, under the tightest constraints, humanity can rise to the challenge of innovation, and produce something on levels no one has ever seen before. The unending fountain of human creativity is something that should not be discounted, no matter how big or small the achievement may be. Because without such willingness to dare, or to stand your ground with what you have, the world, especially the entertainment industry, would not be the bastion of triumph that it is today. So with that in mind, you can't help but say, what the hell happened to Birdemic? Again, visual effects are not an easy box to check, but what sort of pirated bargain bin Microsoft Paint knockoff was responsible for creating these? This movie honestly would have been more convincing if it had elected to stick South Park models in place of the birds, and replace the seagull chants and dive bomber noises with a 1-hour loop of "Oh my god, they killed Kenny." At least at that point, you can put this movie into the category it should have been classified as from the beginning: a tragic comedy. Before we go any further, I just want it to be known that I personally don't have any ill will towards the people who made this movie. Making a movie is by no means an easy feat, no matter what the circumstances. And for what it's worth to those who made it, if you somehow end up watching this video, I'm sorry for anything bad that may have happened to you because of the reputation this movie made for itself. I sincerely hope all of you are doing well now, and that the experiences you had making this movie were worthwhile in some way. I hope whatever lessons you learned helped you along in your lives, and helped you get to a better place. Okay, with the heartfelt stuff dealt with, let's go back to being a dick. After the absolute adventure this movie takes you on, it is safe to say that it finds a special place for itself in movie history, by swaying the untrained eye enough to comfortably earn itself the remarkable, nay, the shocking, final rating of 0 out of 10. Though the movie tries to does things, it does justice to its narrative and handiwork in much the same way that that sentence represents how to speak English. You can take your pick as to whether it's the preachy global warming message, the story, the dialogue, the pacing, the editing, the acting, the camera work, the sound design, the visual effects, the musical score, or the ADR application that rubs you the wrong way. It doesn't really matter. If you value whatever slim pickings you have left to call your sanity through the trials and tribulations of your own life, only attempt to watch this movie after you are heavily under the influence. Just remember, when you are under the influence, do not operate heavy machinery, do not attempt to use sharp or deadly implements, do not call your ex in a fit of love-struck hysterics, and do not violently assault your screen for daring to play the shitty movie you asked it to play. You know, the usual fare. That will be all for today. Thanks for stopping by. If at any point you experienced an episode of enjoyment or clarity, then consider sticking around. Like, subscribe, or share if you wish, and if you have any suggestions for things you want to see reviewed, be sure to drop them down in the comments. There's plenty more to come, so if you end up coming back for more, well, then I'll see you when I see you.